Welcome back to the All Ball Podcast, where it is all ball all the time. You are here with your host, Sean and Isaiah. This is episode number 63, and today we are going to be giving our final predictions for both the Western Conference and Eastern Conference standings. And I have to tell you, I feel like this is going to be so controversial, and we're going to have so many disagreements. But before all that, as always, the question of the day. Isaiah, how are you feeling today?
Man, I'm excited. I'm so ready for NBA basketball to finally get back into regular season form. The preseason was amazing, don't get me wrong, but there were plenty of garbage time minutes and players who would only be playing garbage time minutes getting full game minutes. So I'm excited to see all the stars really running up the minutes, running up the points, all kinds of stats.
Yeah, we got our first two games on Tuesday, so I'm definitely looking forward to that. And just getting the season started with our Rockets and seeing how this year goes for us. But let's go ahead and start with our standings, because I have a feeling this is probably going to take a while with all our explanations of our possible, very bad takes once the season ends. So Isaiah, do you want to start with the Western Conference or the Eastern Conference?
Well, I have my Western Conference standings on top here, so we can start with the West.
All right, I think we should go from 15-1 just to go ahead and make things a little more dramatic.
Ooh, okay.
All right, so
it's not going to be too dramatic, because once you get to like 3, then it's like obvious, but hey, it's still good.
All right.
Because let me tell you, I think our number 15 should be the same.
I definitely think it should be 2. So let's go ahead and say it. The Spurs.
Oh, no, I put the Jazz at 15.
Oh, wow. Okay, see, already our first disagreement. All right, so
Right.
Go ahead and give your explanation on the Jazz being that low.
Okay, so my whole thing is, when you look at the Jazz's roster, in terms of like young, talented players, there's really not much going there, and it's clear that they're trying to rebuild. And then beyond the couple of good young players they have in Colin Sexton and Lauri Markkanen, both of whom I'm not sure how long they can sustain health, especially in the case of Colin Sexton.
Mm-hmm.
Then we have to acknowledge the fact that they have been actively trying to move all of their veteran players, per se. Jordan Clarkson been on the trade block. Mike Conley, I don't think they've actively been shopping a trade for him, but I know that they would if they could. And then I believe Bogdanovich is still untraded, but they were looking for trades for him too.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like either a trade for any one of those or multiple of those guys could come at any time, just further lowering the stability of this team.
So for me, when I look at the Jazz roster, I think that they have, at least compared to the Spurs, they have a lot more overall talent. But like you said, Jordan Clarkson probably gets traded. Mike Conley probably gets traded. A lot of these other guys probably get traded too, who aren't in that young rebuilding mode, or who seem to be here for the future of that rebuild. But I mean, you have to think, like, Colin Sexton, when healthy, is a good player. Lauri Markkanen has shown some good progression over his last couple of years. Malik Beasley, a great offensive player. JV, just one of the. Okay, I was gonna say one of the better fours. Let me not even say that, because I know I'm gonna get roasted. But could develop into something of a low tier starting 4. That's what I'll say.
Okay, all right, yeah, you really saved yourself with that one.
THT, I mean, I'll say he still has some potential, I guess.
Yeah,
I mean,
let me stop.
I don't know.
all of the Lakers antics, they propped him up too high, which made what he is seem worse than he actually is. But I mean, he could be like a decent player.
Yeah, I definitely think he could be like maybe like a fifth or sixth best guy on a roster in his future.
Hmm.
So that's why I kind of have the Jazz over. I just think that for right now, with what they have, they're definitely more talented than the Spurs.
Hmm.
With the Spurs, you know, your best player being like Keldon Johnson, that's not good at all. Um, I mean that's a pretty bad place to start. So you would have to think that they're going all in for Victor. I mean, other than that, really, I have no other reason why the Spurs are down there. They just don't have any kind of talent outside of like Keldon and Devin Vassell and Primo. I mean, they have some other guys there. I believe Josh Richardson is still on the team, right?
Yeah, he is.
So I mean, he's like one of their better players. I mean, like you joked around the other day, Doug McDermott. Um, yeah, it's a pretty lackluster. I mean, that's being generous. Roster, even with Pop still being there, you can't really coach just a handful of guys that aren't able to do much. I guess you could say. But
Okay, that's fair enough. That's fair enough.
let's go ahead and move to 14. I have the
Hmm.
Thunder.
Okay, I have the Spurs at 14. So you can go ahead and talk about your Thunder pick.
So the only reason why I have the Thunder just a little ahead of the Spurs, I won't take too long on this. I think that they have too much young talent, like we've discussed before. But I think their young talent is at least slightly better than the Spurs.
Hmm.
They have Shea, which is alone itself should grant them more wins than the Spurs. They have Lou Dort. They
Yeah.
have Josh Giddey. Obviously,
Hmm.
losing Chet for the whole season sucks and hurts. But I think those three guys alone, in Shea, Lou, and Giddey, should alone just win them at least a couple more games than the Spurs.
Yeah, I basically same line of thinking there.
All right, so I'll go ahead and move to my 13, which is the Jazz.
Okay, and then my 13 is the Thunder. So and you perfectly described why I have them over where I have them. So we can go ahead and move to 12.
All right, and that's going to be our Houston Rockets for me.
Yep, and that is the same pick for me as well.
I feel like we've talked about the Rockets a lot lately, so I won't keep it. I won't keep it going too long. But Jalen Green looks like he's gonna take a huge step this year, especially like I've been talking about with his physicality. There was a
Hmm.
play during this last preseason game where he went straight at
Miles Turner.
yeah, and just
Hmm.
made the layup and looked like he almost ran through Miles
Like,
Turner.
yeah, he like froze in midair after the contact and still made the layup. I remember exactly what you play you're talking about because I saw it and I was just as impressed.
Yeah, that looks like definitely a lot of bulking throughout the offseason. Um,
Hmm.
Jabari Smith, I know we only saw one game of him, but I mean he looked like prime KD.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, so I'm not like I said, I'm not gonna go too much into it. I don't know if you want to give too much of
You
your
know,
explanation.
yeah, I'll go ahead and provide a couple of my little inputs as well. Kevin Porter Jr. has also looked really good. He's definitely shown at least some improvement during this preseason run.
Hmm.
Also, really quickly, Tari Eason, it looks like he's going to be really great for us in
Hmm.
pretty much every aspect of the game. He does it all at least somewhat well. He can score the ball really well, shooting and inside. He has a little bit of playmaking in him. He knows how to kind of be where he needs to be, those intangibles for getting offensive rebounds and such. So I know he's going to be pretty big for us.
Hmm.
But at the same time, honestly, I could see us being over into this next tier of teams if it weren't for this player here that I have to mention. I feel like Shingun has really shown us some downsides, some major downsides during this preseason run.
I wanted to talk about Şengün this episode too, but I also wanted to talk about the standings, so I chose, standings over the Rockets because we've been talking about the Rockets so much. But I will say I don't like the way the Rockets are using Şengün. I want him more in the high post with the ball and playmaking from there, rather than running these pick and rolls, which we know that is not his game at all.
Exactly. Then that's why he's looked so bad, but the defensive end has had him looking awful too. And I can't not admit that. His lack of athleticism really makes him a non-defender against anybody who can jump over a foot high. And so it leaves him in a spot to pick up a bunch of bad fouls because he's trying to play defense with his hands because he can't leave his feet the same way that the offensive player can.
Mm-hmm. I wouldn't be surprised if we start to see not Bruno Fernando take over, but just give him a little more minutes because Şengün looks like he might be not fully conditioned, and we might see Jabari run the 5 more too. But let's go ahead and move to our 11. I think this is where it's going to start to get real controversial.
Okay.
At the 11, I got the Lakers.
I knew that's why you were calling it controversial. And you know what? While I definitely respect that pick, I want to say much like when we were doing our player rankings, I visualized these teams and groupings.
Mm-hmm.
And so now we've moved into the next grouping, which is pretty much the 9 through 11 to me. And I could see it being any one of these 3 teams anywhere. And my number 11 is actually the Trailblazers.
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and say I'm guessing your other team there, because it's going to be the same teams for me, is going to be the Lakers, Kings, and Blazers, correct?
Mm-hmm.
All right, cool. So I got those 3 teams in those 3 spots too.
Okay.
I definitely agree with you that these 3 teams are basically on the same tier. Could end up, honestly, the Lakers and Blazers I could see being better than these seeds, or even being worse. But I think this is more than likely where they'll sit throughout the year. I have a feeling, though, or not a feeling, but I would not be surprised if the Lakers do worse than the Rockets.
You know what? I definitely would be. That is for certain. I would be extremely surprised if they're worse than us.
So a lot of people are making it seem like the Lakers made these really big moves throughout the offseason. And I really stood back and looked at what they did. They didn't do anything. They didn't do anything at all.
We got Thomas Bryant.
We got NBA champion Patrick Beverly.
Yeah.
Man acted like he won a championship. Look, I mean, Beverly's kind of been like an on and off player for me. I've liked him sometimes. I liked him, when he was in Houston. I didn't like him when he left, but I mean, the way they're kind of hyping him up. Like, I still think he's better than Westbrook, but looking at the Lakers organization right now, Bron's getting old. I know we can all agree on that, and he's still Bron in some ways. If AD can't stay healthy, which we've already seen some scares in the preseason, Russell Westbrook can't gel with the team. They're thinking about bringing him off the bench, which I don't even know if that'll help.
And they're still potentially trying to trade him as well. So
yeah,
that's a whole nother can of worms.
The only thing I could see that would really help this team if they trade him to the Pacers, and they're gonna have to surrender those 2 picks that they really don't want to give up. But hopefully they can get Buddy Hield and Turner in return, and I think that'd be a good enough return for them.
You see, I really don't like seeing that trade because I don't think it does anything to help the Pacers. So it would be very stupid of them to make that trade.
Well, okay, we'll get into that when we get to our Eastern Conference. I was going to go into that, but okay, so next at 10, I have the Kings.
Okay, well, In that case, we can talk about the Trailblazers, and
Hmm.
then we'll talk about the Kings to close it out because the Kings are at 10. So
Okay.
all right, so Trailblazers. I think all there really is to say about them is that Dame coming back is definitely big. It's definitely big. I cannot short sell that. I think Jeremy Grant is not going to be as big of a piece for them as they thought he would be when they traded him. I mean, traded for him.
Hmm.
So that's part of the reason why I have them as low as I do. And then another thing is I don't see the use of Nurkic like blow up season that you see coming. I don't really see it. I can definitely understand it after having watched a couple of Blazers preseason games
Hmm.
because he did look a lot better this year, but I wouldn't say that it's him returning to or surpassing his pre-injury form.
So my overview of the Lakers, the Trailblazers, is with Dame being healthy. I definitely think you're guaranteed a playing spot just with him alone. You add Jeremy Grant, who I definitely agree with you with. I don't think will be as big as an impact as people make him out to be.
Hmm.
One good signing though that I liked is Gary Payton. You definitely need some defense, and that's exactly what he'll bring you.
Oh, you know what? They did get him.
Um, but the one thing that holds the Blazers back for me is their depth. Their depth sucks.
Hmm.
I can't
Yep.
even like how do I put it? Point that out enough to where it's just so bad that I think it hurts the team more than anyone can understand.
Yeah, because I think Anthony Simons. Yeah, I think he's the only other like notable player on the team.
I mean, you got Josh Hart, who's a good
Okay, yeah,
player,
Josh Hart's. Yeah, Josh Hart's there.
but I mean, you're looking at like a lot, a rotation of Lillard, Grant, Simons, Peyton Hart, Nurkic, and then somewhere you're gonna have to throw in like Justice Winslow or like
Ugh.
Drew Eubanks.
Oh, you know what? I wanted to say that he was out, but I couldn't remember if he was still on the Spurs or if I was tripping. Yeah, no, he's really there in Portland.
Yeah, maybe you get some Shade and Sharp minutes, but
And you
this
see, I think another problem with their depth chart there is that it is a really guard heavy depth chart
it is.
in terms of the effective players, at least.
Mm-hmm. Um, yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. Guard heavy. There's no like outside of Nurkic and Grant, like there's no one. Like Justice Winslow should not be getting minutes. Drew Eubanks should not be getting minutes. Nas Little should not be getting minutes. Uh, yeah, that I think that definitely sums it up.
Yeah, that is Trailblazers in a nutshell.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the Kings, I want to go ahead and start off on the Kings because I want to say watching their preseason game against the Lakers, they looked extremely good. But you have to, take into account just the preseason, can't put too much stock into it.
Mm-hmm.
And then at the same time, I think De'Aaron Fox had an uncharacteristically great shooting game, and I don't expect him to maintain that same kind of form throughout the regular season.
Mm-hmm.
But even beyond that, I think the team as a whole defensively looks better. But ultimately, when you really look at their roster construction, the talent just isn't there.
Mm-hmm.
De'Aaron Fox, really good. Domantas Sabonis, he all-star potential guy for sure. He's been there before. I think Keegan Murray is going to be in the running for Rookie of the Year because I think he can consistently just be a really effective player. He looks one of the most NBA ready guys out of this draft. And then even Davion Mitchell showed some good improvement. Like the team isn't terrible anymore, as I would say in any season before this.
Mm-hmm.
But I think they're missing that last oomph of talent that would push them into that next echelon of teams.
Yeah, I definitely think they have some good depth here. They added a couple guys like Malik Monk and Kevin Herter. Uh,
Hmm.
Terrence Davis, I think, is a pretty decent player. I think he's actually kind of underrated. Uh,
And
they
I can
they
definitely agree.
they still have Harrison Barnes, Davion Mitchell. Hopefully, makes a jump, and then they still have their big pairing of Sabonis and Fox. And then, like you said, Keegan Murray definitely, with Chet being out, could take one of those spots in the running for Rookie of the Year. But like you also said, they really don't have that one like star player. Like they have Sabonis,
Hmm.
they have Fox, but those guys should not be the best player on your team.
Exactly. And I think that's what separates this next grouping of teams from
Hmm.
this Kings team.
All right, so let's go ahead and move on to that. So my nine is the Blazers, and who's your
And
nine?
then my nine was the Lakers.
Okay, so we talked about that. You want to go ahead and move to eight?
Hmm.
All right, so now I will be honest. This is where we might have some like real disagreements.
I can see it. I can definitely see it.
My number eight is going to be the Dallas Mavericks.
Same number eight. Let's go.
All right. Well, at
Let's
least we're
go.
off to a good start so far.
All right. Yeah, I think the thing with the Mavericks, I think letting Jalen Brunson go is definitely going to hurt them a lot. And then I think the fact that they think JaVale McGee is a better starting center than Christian Wood would be is also going to come back to hurt them.
Yeah, that whole Christian Wood decision is just, you know, pointing me away from them being any better than they can. You have a legitimate lob threat. Not the best. He's by far not the best lob threat out there. But he would work so well in pick and rolls with Luca. And I mean,
Yeah,
I know.
I think like any kind of pick action with Luca and Christian Wood would be devastating against most teams because he is a legitimate roll and pop threat.
Mhm. Yeah, we saw he can definitely be a sniper at times from three. And
Mhm.
I get it, he's not the best at setting those screens, but with Luca compared to KPJ is completely different dynamic.
Exactly. Luca's gravity alone with the ball would make it would make the screen seem 10 times more effective than it actually was.
Hmm. Tim Hardaway Jr. is coming back, so that's good.
Mhm.
That's always a plus. But like you did say though, losing Jalen Brunson is big because that was basically their number two guy last year.
Yeah, and I all respect to Tim Hardaway Jr. I don't see him living up to that. I don't see Spencer Dinwiddie living up to that.
Mm-mm.
I definitely don't see Reggie Bullock or Dorian Finney-Smith living up to that. So it leaves a pretty clear hole for their number two guy who could have been Christian Wood, but they don't see that either.
And then just to make things even worse, you still have Drew Davis Bertans on the roster with that terrible contract.
Oh man. Terrible contract and terrible play as of recent years.
Yeah. So let's go to move to seven. Uh, this might surprise you, but I got the Grizzlies at seven.
Oh, okay. Funny enough, I actually have the Timberwolves at seven. So that's
Oh, okay. Wow. All right. So
all right. So these are both pretty controversial for the seventh spot. So do you want to go first?
yeah, I'll go ahead and go. So
Okay.
I think the biggest issue here is Jaren Jackson being out.
Mm,
I think John Morant, I know you're gonna disagree with me, is a really big star in the league, but
no, I definitely say he's a really big star. I just don't think he's a definitive top 10 player.
all right, fair enough. Um, but outside of John Morant, you look at this roster, and it kind of seems like it actually is. I think it is the truth. But they got really lucky last year.
Hmm.
Jaren Jackson is a clear number two. You got Desmond Bain, who's good, but outside of John Morant Desmond Bain, Jared Jackson, who obviously is going to be out, you don't really have too much. You have Dylan Brooks, who's good. You got Tyus Jones, who's a great
Amen.
backup point guard. You got
Man, don't
Steven
sleep on
Adams.
Steven Adams,
Oh,
man.
okay. Well,
Thank
look, the
you.
man set some monster screens. But like, there's not much impact out there other than Jaren Jackson, John Morant, and Desmond Bain. I just feel like they're not going to be the team that they were. They got really lucky last year with the Clippers and Nuggets being both heavily injured. I just think they're going to take a big fall in the standings.
Okay, you know what? And I can definitely see that because I have them taking a fall in my standings. Not as drastic as you have them,
Mm-hmm.
because I think Ja just won't let it sink that bad unless he gets injured or something.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I can definitely see what you mean because I also believe that them being what were they the second seed last
Yeah.
season?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Second seed.
yeah, I think that was a fluke for sure.
Mm-hmm. I definitely think they'll be atop the Southwest Division for a long time. Well, maybe not for a long time because
Hmm.
the Rockets are coming up. But they'll definitely be up there with us and the Pelicans. But yeah, so go ahead and go into the Timberwolves being at 7.
Okay, so my Timberwolves pick. You've heard me be a great advocate for Rudy Gobert, and I actually do believe that him playing alongside D'Angelo Russell rather than Donovan Mitchell will be big for his offensive game slightly. I think it'll give him more opportunity to be a better offensive player because we have a more willing passer running that offense.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, all credit to Anthony Edwards and Karl Anthony Towns for being great players. But I think ultimately the thing that's going to hold this team back is just the inconsistency among most of those most of those four guys. And then I feel like their coaching just isn't that good either.
I'll be honest, I don't remember the coach's name for the Timberwolves.
Exactly. That's exactly my point. I don't remember the coach's name. And when things got tough for them in the playoffs last year, I don't remember anything big happening that wasn't an obvious move, like taking Cat out when he had 4 fouls in the second quarter.
I'll go ahead and get to the Timberwolves whenever I get some in my standings.
Okay.
So number 6, this one might surprise you even more than the Grizzlies, but I got the Suns at 6.
Oh man, you are dropping these teams.
I am.
My number 6 is the Clippers.
Oh man. All right. So I'll get into the Suns real quick. I
Okay.
think the whole DeAndre Ayton thing is gonna tear this team apart. I
Mm,
obviously understand that he's not the best player on the team by any means,
but he
but
is a very big piece.
he
I
is a
know
big
that.
piece and he's impactful. You have to think like outside of Booker and Chris Paul, you have Mikal Bridges,
Hmm.
who is a monster on defense and one of the best 3-and-D players there is in the league. But then you look at the rest of this roster. You got
Oh, you know what? They're trying to ship Jay Crowder.
yeah, yeah,
Forgot about that.
like that's your starting power forward. You got Cam Johnson, who yes can play the power forward, but more than likely they're just gonna bring him off the bench.
Hmm.
Outside of that, you have no one. You have what? Damian Lee? You don't want Damian Lee getting minutes. You have Josh Okogie.
Dario Sarge.
Like Cameron Payne is by far like your best other player off the bench. That's I don't think they're built like they'll be a good regular season team, but with all these other teams coming back, I don't think they're built for another championship run. I just don't see it
Yeah,
anymore.
I can definitely see that. I don't. I have them higher in the standings for sure,
Hmm.
but I don't see them getting in a deep playoff run. I don't see it. Like, absolutely agree with you. With the same reasoning that you have them at the 6th seed, that's the same reasoning that I don't believe they make a deep playoff run.
Hmm. Yeah, it's just when you look at the rest of their roster outside of their starting five, which their starting five, if they keep it the way it is, I don't think it's gonna happen. But if when you look at that starting five, it's a very complete starting five. But outside of that, they really don't have much.
Hmm.
So that's and you're gonna lose DeAndre Ayton more than likely. So with DeAndre Ayton gone, you're basically a minus at power forward now and at center. And I just don't think that's when you're two tallest players or whatever you're supposed to be two tallest players are your biggest weaknesses. It's not a recipe for success. Um,
Great. So I'll get into the Clippers right quick since I have them at
mm,
6. I think I think their standing here is primarily going to be due to just resting. I
mm,
think that in terms of the regular season, Kawhi is just coming back after sitting out like a season and a half, I think,
mm,
probably a little more than that. So with that, you have a guy who's super rusty in terms of the wear and tear and the absolute stamina that comes with having to play an 82 game season. And he himself has not played 82 games, I don't think ever, but even if he has, it wouldn't have been since his San Antonio days, which are long ago at this point.
mm,
Paul George, who, if he doesn't get injured, even if he doesn't get injured, he's definitely still going to need some rest games in there. And then beyond them, I mean, you have what? John Wall, Robert Covington, Norman Powell, all really good players. But when those two guys are sitting out, I don't see them winning very many games.
all right, so I'll go ahead and get to them too whenever they come up in my standings.
Okay.
At
So
five,
we
I
can
got
go ahead and move to 5.
at five I got the Pelicans.
Okay, I have them at 5 too.
All right, so I think Zion is definitely the biggest the biggest story here coming back.
Mm-hmm.
I think that alone makes them a 1 through 5 seed. Maybe not one, but like a
Yeah.
3 through 6 seed alone.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I have to say that I think they have some good pieces, but I still don't think this tier of team is good enough to win a championship yet.
Yeah, and I 100% agree with you. I think that, except I think mine extends a little higher, up to like 4, maybe even 3.
Mm,
But yeah, I think that Zion coming back is definitely going to be really big for them. Brandon Ingram is looking as good as ever. CJ McCollum, he's looking pretty decent. He'll probably look better once the regular season actually begins. Their rookies from last year were so good in the playoffs. So I feel like coming into this sophomore season, they're just gonna look even more improved. Valanciunas is a very, very solid player. So yeah, I think that they have all the makings for a really like competitive playoff team, but not a contender.
mm. So let's go ahead and move to 4, and this is
Hmm.
where I have the Timberwolves.
Okay, this is where I have the Grizzlies.
Okay, so for the Timberwolves, what I have to say is I understand that they surrendered a lot of their depth. I guess if that's what you want to call it.
Hmm.
Um, but they added Rudy Gobert, who I definitely have started to lean more into as, you know, I guess I'll go ahead and say that yes, he definitely was the whole reason for the success of the Jazz. Um,
Ah,
so I know that you brought up earlier that playing with D'Angelo Russell's got a better offensive, help his offensive game. I don't even
mhm.
think that he even has to worry about that anymore just because of who he's playing with now.
Oh yeah, absolutely doesn't need to. It's just from what I've seen in the preseason so far.
Hmm.
D'Angelo Russell definitely hits him with better passes and better positions.
Hmm. Like you think about it with the Jazz, he's their number two best player, and well, not number two. I'm sorry, number one. But uh, obviously, Donovan Mitchell's going to take the spotlight from him because of he's flashier.
Hmm.
Um, but like outside of Rudy Gobert, you look at the guys around it. Like, yeah, maybe Jordan Clarkson was your second, points per game, whatever player, and then like there was Mike Conley. But other than Donovan Mitchell, who were you really looking towards offensively to get stuff done? And you think about the Jazz of what they've been called over the last couple of years, and it's the defensive sided team. And each and every year, they got exposed for their perimeter defense. And then you really look at it, and it was Rudy Gobert holding it all together for their success of the regular season. Now with him being over here in Minnesota, he doesn't have to even worry about offense. He could fully commit to his defense and his energy on that side of the ball, and just let his offensive weapons in D'Angelo Russell, Cat, and Edwards just go ahead and take over. And I think this is going to be one of the better regular season teams, as they are at number 4. But I don't think they're primed for a deep playoff run. I actually think they'll probably still get eliminated in the first round. I just
No,
don't.
that's funny.
Do you have them being eliminated in the first round too?
Oh, well, I mean, I have them lower in the standings, so I think
Right.
that tells you about that.
Okay.
So I definitely think they're going to get eliminated in the first round for sure. Because, like I said, I just don't believe in the consistency, especially between Cat and D'Angelo Russell.
Mm-hmm.
I have a little bit more faith in Anthony Edwards' consistency, and then Rudy Gobert, his only consistency needs to be defense, and he is probably the most consistent defensive player in the league.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I think it's really just a matter of if D'Angelo Russell and Karl Anthony Towns can surpass my expectations and actually string together more than 2 good to great offensive games.
Mm-hmm. You want to go ahead and talk about the Grizzlies being at 4 real quick?
Really not too much to say there. I think this really just comes down to Ja. I think Ja has reached a point in his career, a point in the level of play where he alone can really carry a team like this, especially considering that while Jaren Jackson Jr. is going to be out, the team around him, as you pointed out, it's not great, but I think there's definitely some really solid base pieces that'll do enough for Ja's workload to carry this team up to a 4th seed.
All right. I think those base pieces might be, in my opinion, a little bit overrated. And like I said, I think they got lucky last year with the health injuries going around the Western Conference. And I hate to call them overrated because I actually don't think that's what they are. I think they're more so just...
They were lucky.
They were lucky, yeah. That because I don't want to call them overrated because I don't think that's what they are. I just couldn't think of a better word at the moment. So I'll just say that, yeah, they got lucky with the health issues.
Mm-hmm.
So let's move on to number 3. At number 3, I got the Warriors.
Ooh, number 3, I have the Suns. I'll go ahead and go through them really quickly since you already talked about them for the most part. My whole thing about the Suns is this is my ranking, assuming that the DeAndre Ayton situation is more than is not as big as it seems to be.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but other than that, it's all of the concerns that you brought up are definitely there, which is why I don't think that they become a definitive number 1 seed anymore or anything. I think they're down here at 3. And honestly, I could see them even going as far as 5, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think Devin Booker, he's much like Ja. I think he's in a position where he can really contribute to keeping a team competitive. Chris Paul is still doing what he's done best for his entire career, getting guys involved in their spots and hitting shots when he needs to. Like you said, Mikal Bridges, one of the best 3-and-D guys in the league. And so I think that little nucleus there alone should at least keep them in this competitive area. But I think that the way that I see it, I think that this section of teams is definitely below my 1 and 2 teams.
Okay. All I have to say for the Warriors is two words: cruise control. And when I say that, I just think they're going to cruise through the regular season, just get everyone ready for
Hmm.
the playoffs and run for that championship again. I think they're a good enough team that they won't even fall below the 3 seed. So basically, for me, this is their floor.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think they'll just go ahead and they'll get Steph his rest days. They'll give Clay his rest days. They might even give Draymond a good amount of rest days. And they got the pieces around that team to go ahead and I think be good enough to be a 3 seed or higher, and then go ahead and you know go at it again for another championship. That's
All
all I
right.
really have to say about them. So for number two, I got the Clippers.
Okay. Number two is where I have the Warriors.
Hmm.
Just to add a little bit, my thing is that they have looked really scary in this preseason. And I think the biggest thing is one, they just committed to Jordan Poole and Andrew Wiggins, hit them both with 4 year extensions.
Hmm.
So both of those guys are they're fully locked in with the team. I feel like that show of, I want to say, solidarity in terms of Jordan Poole, and then just show of respect and I can't think of the word I'm looking for right now, but belief in Andrew Wiggins being the guy that he's been for them.
Hmm.
So I believe that that's going to keep those guys improving for the team, constantly getting better. If even if it's not huge jumps, just improving bit by bit, staying consistent and all that. I think that's going to be big for them. Obviously, Steph will have his rest games and all of that. He might have like minor injuries throughout the season, but Clay is looking better than he was when he came back. So I think that's going to be a big part in them being better. Even though his future with the team is uncertain, Draymond is still here for this year, and he's an important piece to the fluidity of their offense, which is funny considering his offensive game is pretty limited.
Yeah.
And then another thing is that Jonathan Kuminga actually looks like he is the most terrifying piece for this team to me,
Hmm.
because his improvement, that at least of what he's shown in the preseason, looked amazing. He looked like he really knew where to be at what time a lot more. His playmaking looked a lot better. Defense was already there. His shot not necessarily looking any better or worse, but it's decent. And then, athletic freak, of course. So I think that he can be a really big X factor for this team's both regular season and playoff success.
Do you think he could be a most improved player or candidate?
I don't think he'll get the minutes for it, but
Okay.
I think definitely in terms of the quality of player that he's jumped up to, I think if he got the minutes on a different team, he could definitely be a high candidate for that reward.
Okay. I'll go ahead and talk about the Clippers real quick. All I have to really say about
Okay.
them is I think their depth is way overlooked. Like, think about the starting lineup. It's probably going to be John Wall, Norman Powell, Kawhi. I'm sorry, John Wall, Norman Powell, Paul George, Kawhi Leonard, and Zubac. I'm guessing that's the lineup they're probably going to run out there. Then off the bench, you still have Reggie Jackson, Terrence Mann, and some rotation of Luke Kennard, Marcus Morris, Robert Covington, Brandon Boston, Nicholas Batum, and Amir Coffey. All those
Hmm.
guys, like, in some way warrant some kind of minutes. So they have a really good problem having too many players that deserve minutes. And I think with Kawhi, I mean, like you said before, he hasn't looked, 100% himself, but that's kind of expected after missing so much time. I think this team can definitely even take the 1 seed, but I think this team is way overlooked in the depth area of their team.
Okay, I can definitely respect the depth argument, but like I said, with where I have them, I just think Kawhi and PG getting their rest games in is going to be too much of a factor for them to not win a lot of games.
Hmm.
Because while their depth is good, I don't think their depth will necessarily overcome the star power of certain teams. And if Kawhi and or PG are resting in those games, then there's nothing they can do about that. That's just the way basketball is.
Hmm. I have to say though, I think the one place they lack is a backup big. I think if they can go out and trade
Hmm.
for a guy like a Nerlens Noel or something like that, I think that'll
Yeah,
definitely help them out. So let's go ahead and move on to our number one, and I believe that we
yep.
both have the same, and it's
We
the
have
Denver
both narrowed it
Nuggets.
down to the Denver Nuggets. Yeah, I think it's pretty clear why Nikola Jokic, without the help of Jamal Murray or Michael Porter Jr., has absolutely held down the fort. Had two of the most impactful seasons in league history. On top of that, like the depth was really not there.
Hmm.
Even though like even though you only took two guys out of the lineup, it felt like there was only like seven players on the team because
Hmm.
the depth really was not there. But now you have Jokic, who's obviously still going to be the same caliber of player. I don't think he's going to just get worse. You have Michael Porter Jr., who's come back and look amazing. He's looked just in his regular form as he was before. Actually, even a little better because he's doing a lot more playmaking than he would have done before. I've
Hmm.
noticed that Jamal Murray looks like he's going to be back to form soon. And like you said, when we talked about this team before, Jamal Murray will probably be one of the guys to snap back into form the quickest
Hmm.
because of playing alongside Nurkic. Even though,
Jokic.
yeah, oh, yeah, yeah. Really sorry.
You're good.
That
You're
is a
good.
bad mix up to get there between those two guys, if you know about the history between them. But DeAndre Jordan, he's up there in age, but as a backup piece, I think he should be decent. And then I think some of their bench guys have had some pretty good improvement in terms of Bones Highland and Zeke Naji. Then they picked up KCP, who could be a big piece. Obviously, they still have Aaron Gordon as their starting four. Bruce Brown was another big pickup. So yeah, I think this team really has a lot better depth now, and they got back two huge pieces to their success.
Yeah, I can't even say anything. You literally said everything I wanted to say. So I'm just gonna go ahead and say, I think that the two biggest, I guess, differences we had were the Suns and the Grizzlies. I think
Hmm.
those were the two biggest. And other than that, I
And then
think
obviously the teams that were in their spots for me instead, because the
Oh, right,
Clippers
right,
and
right,
Timberwolves being low. But yeah,
right. Other than that, I think we agreed most part on the Western Conference. But I think when it comes to this Eastern Conference, it's gonna get pretty tricky. We've already been recording for quite a while, so
yeah.
let's
So
just
I
go ahead and
think
get into this Eastern Conference.
you see, actually, what I was gonna say was I think we could just cut it here,
Okay.
and then we could do a separate video for the East.
All right. Well, so let's go ahead and save the East for next week then. Uh,
Mm.
all right. Well, that's gonna be the end of the episode. Go ahead and drop your standings down below. What you think? What you think the Western Conference will line up to be this year? If you enjoyed the episode, go ahead and leave a like and subscribe and comment down below. Isaiah, any last comments?
Don't forget, share the podcast with as many people as you can.
All right. We will catch you next week.